Have you ever seen photos that change the way you see history forever? Today we uncover rare and powerful photographs that tell stories of resilience, strength, and survival from a challenging era. Welcome to the Timeless Frames. Let's start. Chained slaves in Zanzibar, 1865. A photograph of enslaved individuals in chains in Zanzibar, East Africa, illustrating the global reach of the slave trade and its atrocities. A slave's shackles, 1800s. The heavy shackles enslaved people wore were a daily reminder of their captivity and brutal treatment. Child labor on southern plantations. This image depicts young enslaved children working in harsh conditions on plantations, deprived of education and a normal childhood. The slave dwellings, 1800s. Slave quarters were often tiny, poorly ventilated spaces, providing no comfort or privacy. How long did it take for these scars to fade? If they ever did, let's watch. Whip marks on skin, 1860s. The scars left by whippings were not just physical, they marked the soul of the enslaved. Slave labor on cotton fields, 1850s. The labor on cotton plantations was grueling and unending, with enslaved workers harvesting crops for minimal to no compensation. Slave chains, 1830s. Enslaved people endured constant physical restraint, never fully free, even in moments of supposed rest. Field labor, 1700s. Fields were worked from dawn to dusk, and even then, enslaved people had little to no rest or time to themselves. Wilson Chin, a branded slave from Louisiana, 1863. This photograph features Wilson Chin, an emancipated slave, displaying the branding on his forehead and the shackles used to restrain him, highlighting the cruelty of slaveholders. Slaves in the southern states, 1850s. In the southern states, enslaved people lived under constant surveillance, their every move controlled. The slave ships, 1700s. Slave ships, like the one shown here, were cramped, disease-ridden, and often the site of immense suffering during the brutal Middle Passage. Slaves' personal belongings, 1800s. The personal items of enslaved people were few, but each one held a piece of their humanity in a world that sought to strip it away. The plantation owners, 1800s. Plantation owners held immense power, profiting from the exploitation of enslaved labor while living in luxury. Slave auctions in the South, 1860s. Slave auctions in the South were public, dehumanizing events where families were torn apart and lives forever altered. Harriet Tubman, 1850s. Harriet Tubman was a leader of the Underground Railroad, guiding hundreds to freedom despite the grave dangers she faced. Fugitive slave advertisements, 1850s. Fugitive slave ads were posted, offering rewards for the capture of runaway slaves, showing how human lives were treated as commodities. The Confederate flag, 1860s. The Confederate flag symbolized resistance to abolition and the preservation of slavery during the Civil War. Slave branding, 1800s. Some enslaved individuals were branded with marks to indicate ownership, a brutal reminder of their captivity. Slave rebellion leader, Nat Turner, 1831. In 1831, Nat Turner led a slave rebellion in Virginia, but it was crushed and he was executed for his defiance. A slave's struggle for education, 1800s. Enslaved people risked severe punishment to learn how to read and write, seeing education as a path to freedom. The Middle Passage, 1700s. The Middle Passage was the brutal transatlantic journey that brought millions of Africans to the Americas in chains, many dying along the way. Slave pen, 1850s. Slave pens were used to hold enslaved people before they were auctioned off, a place where hope was crushed under the weight of captivity. Slave children, 1840s. Enslaved children were raised in the brutal realities of slavery, often forced to work at an early age. A slave family, 1850s. Slave families lived under the constant threat of separation, where even the closest relationships could be torn apart in an instant. Slave refugees, 1860s. During the Civil War, many enslaved people fled to Union lines, hoping for freedom and protection from their former captors. How many lives ended in unmarked graves, their stories lost to time but never forgotten? Slave burial ground, 1800s. Many enslaved people were buried in unmarked graves, their lives and contributions erased from history by those who oppressed them. How did it feel to be stripped of your identity and sold in public, as if you were livestock? Slave market, 1830s. Slave markets were common in the 1800s, where people were bought and sold like animals, often separated from their families. Frederick Douglass, The Voice of Freedom, 1860. A rare portrait of Frederick Douglass, one of the most influential abolitionists in history. His unwavering gaze and powerful stance symbolize the fight for equality and justice. Baltimore's whipping post, early 1900s. This photo shows a man tied to Baltimore's whipping post, a brutal punishment method of the early 20th century. Observers stand by as law enforcement oversees the scene. Sojourner Truth, the abolitionist icon, 1864. A photo of Sojourner Truth, a former slave who became a prominent activist for abolition and women's rights. Her strength and courage inspired countless others. Solomon Northup's Shackles, 1841. An image of the actual shackles worn by Solomon Northup, whose story was immortalized in 12 Years a Slave. They stand as a stark reminder of his harrowing ordeal. The Underground Railroad Safe House, 1856. A historic building that served as a refuge for escaping slaves. Its hidden compartments and secret passages tell stories of bravery and solidarity. Slave ship diagram, humanity reduced to cargo. A chilling blueprint of a slave ship showing how enslaved people were packed tightly for the transatlantic journey. It's a visual representation of dehumanization. Freedmen's School in Alabama, 1867. A photo of newly freed individuals attending school for the first time. Their eager faces reflect the transformative power of education. The Bell of Freedom, Liberia's independence, 1847. A photo of the bell rang during Liberia's Declaration of Independence, a nation founded by freed African Americans. It's a symbol of hope and resilience. Frederick Douglass's home in Washington, 1877. A photo of the home where Douglass lived in his later years, now a museum. It stands as a tribute to his life's work. Harriet Beecher Stowe's writing desk, 1851. An image of the desk where Stowe penned Uncle Tom's Cabin, a book that exposed the horrors of slavery to the world. Survivors of the Clotilda, late 19th century. This photograph features two survivors of the Clotilda, the last known slave ship to arrive in the U.S. Their resilience stands as a powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. Portrait of two African-American women sharecroppers, Mississippi Delta, 1910. Two women stand together, representing the resilience of sharecroppers in the post-slavery era. Their expressions reflect strength and determination. Slaves Reunion, 1917. A photo capturing a reunion of former slaves, a rare moment of unity. It symbolizes their shared survival and enduring bonds. Elijah J. McCoy, 1843-1929. Born in Canada to escape slaves, Elijah McCoy studied engineering and became an inventor. His groundbreaking work in steam engine lubrication is legendary. Grandchildren of Slaves, 1902. This image shows grandchildren of slaves embodying a new chapter after emancipation. They reflect hope for a brighter future. Enslaved women in colonial Virginia. This image reflects the hardships and resilience of enslaved women in colonial Virginia. They endured social and physical oppression while fighting silently for survival and dignity. The harsh reality of enslaved lives. This image portrays the brutal conditions endured by enslaved individuals, bound in chains and stripped of their freedom. It serves as a stark reminder of humanity's darkest chapters in history. The removal of shackles, a step towards freedom. This image captures a pivotal moment as a sailor removes the iron shackles from an enslaved man. It symbolizes hope, liberation, and the end of a dark chapter in human history. Lives of enslaved families. This photograph, captured during the mid-19th century, provides a poignant look at an enslaved family in America. It serves as a stark reminder of the resilience and humanity of those who endured the horrors of slavery. Lady and Slaves, 1860. This 1860 photograph from Brazil illustrates the rigid social order during the era of slavery. It depicts an elite woman seated in a covered chair, accompanied by enslaved men tasked with transporting her. Harriet Tubman, leading others to freedom. An image of Harriet Tubman guiding enslaved individuals through the Underground Railroad reflects her bravery and commitment. As a beacon of hope, she risked her life to ensure freedom for others, earning her a place as an enduring symbol of courage and justice. The reunion of Henry and Clara. After years of separation, Henry, a freedman, found his wife Clara in a distant state. This image captures their tearful embrace, a testament to enduring love despite unimaginable odds. The 4th U.S. Colored Infantry, African-American soldiers in the Civil War, 1863. African-American soldiers, like those in the 4th U.S. Colored Infantry, played a crucial role in the Union's victory during the Civil War despite facing racism and adversity. Imagine being a teenager and forced into labor for a crime you didn't commit. Let's watch. Convict leasing, African-American teenagers in Florida's labor system, post-slavery era. After slavery, African-American teenagers were exploited through convict leasing, forced into unpaid labor under harsh conditions in Florida. Win Willis, a former slave story and the horn of the past, 1939. Win Willis, a former slave, shared his painful memories of being forced to work by the horn of his former owner in 1939. Anastasia's Iron Mask, torture in Brazilian slavery. 19th century, Anastasia's iron mask symbolizes the brutal treatment of enslaved people in Brazil, used to silence and punish those who resisted. Cotton picking in the South, the labor of enslaved Africans. 19th century enslaved Africans worked relentlessly in the cotton fields of the South, enduring harsh conditions to fuel the booming cotton industry. Tobacco sorting in colonial Indonesia. The labor of the oppressed, 1897. In colonial Indonesia, tobacco sorting was a grueling job for oppressed workers, including Chinese and Indian laborers under Dutch rule. Omar ibn Said, an Islamic scholar turned slave in America, 1800s. Omar ibn Said, a scholar from Senegal, was captured and sold into slavery in the U.S., offering a unique perspective on the transatlantic slave trade. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the Timeless Frames channel to get more videos like this.